Hi everybody, I'm Tara from Crooked Row. Today we're going to talk about our secret in great garden vegetables. So one secret that we have, this is just one, is we actually raise our own worms, red wigglers. And we get them from Uncle Jim's Worm Farm. You can get that online. And I'm going to show you our whole setup here in just a second, but just to name a few things of why we use them. So if you use so worms, as you raise them, you put compost in the bedding that you raise them in. Just kitchen scraps. We put coffee in there, like our coffee grounds. But you can put anything in there. We don't put oil and we don't put meat in it. We try to do limited things, like we don't put a bunch of citrus peels or not tons of seeds. We do put some seeds in there and some things sprout, but we don't put things that are hard to break down. Citrus, I think the worms don't tend to like so much anyway, but what happens is they eat all that and then they poop. And so that poop is extremely valuable. And a lot of people call it black gold. I would happen to agree with that. It's sort of like the perfect balanced, it's not even just compost, it's the perfect balanced fertilizer. So many people run into, there's too much nitrogen, or there's not enough nitrogen, or there's too much potassium, there's too much, of the different things. But worm castings are extremely balanced. So let's get into my Rubbermaid containers and I'll show you how to raise them. So here is my Rubbermaid container. I get a good one. I don't get a cheap one because it does actually sustain, some weight against the sides. And as you can see, we've had this for a few years. This is even starting to tear up. So kind of keep that in mind if you're going to go buy a Rubbermaid container. Some people put it in old tubs that they tear out, which is a great idea. But you'll fill it with something called coconut coir, which this isn't the coconut coir. This is actually broken down, beautiful worm castings. But coconut coir, you just order your worms. You get your red wigglers from like Uncle Jim's Worm Farm, like I said before, and you wet it like a damp sponge. Not where you can like wring water out, but you want it very moist like soil is. And you fill it once it's expanded, because you'll get it in a cube. And so once it's expanded, you put it in this, I call these totes, or storage containers, or whatever container you need. You don't have to use a Rubbermaid container, but if you do use a container like this, you want to make sure that there's plenty of air circulation. In our last container, the lid closed so tightly that we actually drilled holes all in the sides and then put a screen. We just bought like normal screen from the hardware store and then glued it over the holes so the worms couldn't get out, but they still had plenty of air circulation. Again, use whatever container you want. Put in the expanded, moist coconut coir, and then your worms will most likely come in a bag. And so you kind of pull the coconut coir apart and put them in with a little bit of food, and then I line a new one with damp newspaper to just keep the light out and keep the worms in.
Only covering the top, right?
Only covering the top of the coconut coir, so that the worms don't get out, because they will get out. They did on our very first batch. And then you just, about once a week, we feed ours, and we just save our kitchen scraps, and then we come out, and what we do is, if the worms will kind of conglomerate together in like a big lump, and they'll eat right in that mass and lay eggs there. So we go to a place where they're not conglomerated, and we dig down and we put the compost in, and then we cover it back over And then eventually the worms will migrate to that spot because they'll start to smell it. And so you do this over about a 3-month period. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter. You just keep an eye on it. But what you'll see when you know you have some great worm castings is you'll see this beautiful, moist, dark, and that's all poop, which hence why I'm wearing gloves. But it shouldn't smell bad. It should smell like soil. And you'll want to let the worms go ahead and compost whatever food is in there. Like right now we have food compost in there. This was from our garlic. And so we will, because we're trying to harvest this now, we don't want the worms and we don't want the food. So my son Christopher made this kind of sieve, and you can make this smaller or larger, however you want it, whatever you want yours to look like. We just got hardware cloth. He made a crude frame and then just attached it to the bottom, and you just fill it. You have another empty Rubbermaid container, and you fill it with the castings. This might be too big. It might shake the worms out too. And you shake, shake, shake. Oops. Shake, shake, shake. And it should leave behind big materials and worms. So I want to keep my worms. I don't want the worms going in the garden. I mean, worms in garden is great, but we're in the fall and we're getting ready to overwinter, and I like to raise my worms in here and then use their castings. And so then I just throw them in the other side, clean my screen, and do it again. So I'm actually going to let Elijah do this because he's never done it before. So Elijah, let's get started. The difference between the two. Over here is why they call it black gold. That is extremely dark brown, if not black. And this is all brand new coconut coir bedding that we have put in. We have wetted and put in, and we're gonna dump the worms in it, in their, a little bit of their old castings or compost or whatever you want to call it. And then we're going to put wet cardboard or newspaper over top to keep them in, and we will put the lid down on that. Well, that's that. So now we have our worms all set up again this year to try to get our own worm castings. I like to have our own, but if you're in a place where you can't raise worms, and that is possible, if you're in a place that doesn't have space to, most places have a space. If you have a back porch, a garage, a carport, a basement, a barn, a shed, any kind of backyard at all. If you're gonna leave it in the backyard during winter, if it gets cold in your winters, you want to put like bales of straw around it to kind of keep them a little bit shielded. But other than that, in any other, other setting, you typically don't need to surround them. It's raining, I'm sorry for the noise. But this will allow you to have the perfect mixture of what you need in a fertilizer. And this is actually why we grow such great big garlic. We almost totally use a little bit of Espoma fertilizer, but not very much. We mostly just use our worm castings, and then we get those huge heads of garlic. So if you want to start your own, it's as easy as a Rubbermaid container and coconut coir, which you can get off of Amazon and have delivered straight to your door. Again, Uncle Jim's Worm Farm. We'll put all of this below in the description. Oh, we're getting more and more rain. So if you have any questions, you can always ask in the comments and we'll try to answer them as soon as we see them. But you just harvest the castings exactly how we did today, and we will use this straight in the garden. So there's really nothing to it. Like most things with gardening, there's really nothing to it. It's not super complicated, and it's something that everybody can do. So remember, if we can do our own worm castings, anybody can. Thanks. Bye.